The morning fog hung low over the English countryside, wrapping the meadow in a veil of gray. Tall grass bent under the weight of dew as a local farmer walked his usual route. Nothing seemed out of place until he spotted something unusual through the mist. Two still forms where no one should have been. In that moment, his ordinary Thursday became the beginning of an extraordinary investigation. James Harrington and Eliza Winters lay beside each other in a remote field, 5 miles from the luxury estate where they'd checked in just days before. Their weekend away from London's constant buzz wasn't meant to end here. In the quiet of rural England, their lives cut unexpectedly short. In their abandoned car, parked on a rarely used track nearby, investigators found evidence of intentions that would never materialize, a small velvet box tucked away in the glove compartment. Inside rested an antique diamond ring, a Harrington family heirloom carried secretly from London. James had planned every detail of this weekend, from the exclusive accommodation to the precise moment he would ask Eliza to be his wife. The contrast was jarring. Meticulous plans for a future together ended in a desolate field far from the champagne and celebration James had envisioned. No signs of robbery complicated the scene. His wallet remained filled with cash, her jewelry untouched. What force had redirected these two successful professionals from their intended path of romance to this tragic end? The answers weren't obvious. They stretched across different worlds, his in high finance, hers in contemporary art. They involved suspicious transactions flagged on banking terminals, threatening messages about controversial artwork, and other guests of the estate with connections to both. If unsolved mysteries keep you up at night, if you find yourself wondering how lives so carefully constructed can unravel so completely, stay with me. Subscribe and click the notification bell. This channel examines cases where the line between professional success and personal danger blurs in unexpected ways. This is the story of James and Eliza, of a proposal that never happened, and of how their final weekend revealed secrets neither of them fully understood. To understand what happened in that countryside meadow, we need to step back 3 years to a crisp winter evening in London. The British Museum's Grand Hall hosted an annual charity gala, bringing together the city's elite for an evening of philanthropy and networking. James Harrington attended representing Wentworth and Lloyd, his investment bank. He wasn't particularly interested in art, but understood these events were crucial for client relations. Eliza Winters moved through the room with purpose. As the newest curator of the Hayward Gallery, she was there to connect with potential donors and artists. Her contemporary approach to curation had already earned her recognition in London's competitive art scene. She wore a midnight blue dress that evening, her dark hair pulled back in a simple style that emphasized her confident demeanor. Their worlds shouldn't have overlapped. James dealt in market predictions, investment portfolios, and wealth management for clients whose names rarely appeared in public. His days were structured by meetings, analysis, and the steady rhythm of financial markets. He'd risen quickly at Wentworth and Lloyd, known for his remarkable ability to identify emerging financial patterns others missed. Colleagues described him as methodical, reserved, and intensely private about his personal life. James could walk into a room of numbers that made no sense to anyone else and find the story they were telling, explained Thomas Blackwood, a fellow banker who'd known him since university. He wasn't just looking at profits. He noticed inconsistencies that didn't make sense. That made him valuable, but it also made certain people uncomfortable. Eliza's professional reputation took a different shape. Her exhibitions challenged conventions, often featuring artists whose work questioned political and economic systems. She built relationships with creators others considered too controversial. Her office walls displayed photos of her standing alongside painters, sculptors, and photographers whose work sparked debate across Europe. She had this remarkable ability to see the message behind provocative art, said Natalie Wong, a gallery owner who collaborated with Eliza. She wasn't interested in shock value for its own sake. She wanted art that made people question their assumptions about how society functions. These different approaches to life, his grounded in structure and analysis, hers in challenging established narratives, shouldn't have created connection. Yet at that charity gala, when James accidentally spilled champagne on Eliza's portfolio of exhibition concepts, their conversation moved quickly from awkward apologies to genuine interest. I remember them in deep conversation by the Egyptian artifacts, recalled Diane Holloway, who organized the event. They seemed to forget everyone else was there. It was unusual for James. He typically made his required appearances at these functions and left early. Their first date wasn't conventional. Eliza invited James to the opening of an exhibition featuring financial data transformed into abstract sculptures. The artist had created visual representations of market crashes and economic bubbles. James surprised her with thoughtful observations about the connection between the artwork and actual financial patterns he'd studied. That was the night I realized he wasn't a typical banker, Eliza later told her friend Hannah. He understood what the artist was saying about how invisible numbers affect real lives. He saw past the surface. Their relationship progressed through London's changing seasons. They navigated the challenges of different schedules. His early mornings at the bank, her late evenings at gallery openings. Friends from both worlds expressed surprise at the pairing, but noticed how they complemented each other. James became more comfortable at art events. Eliza developed an interest in financial systems and their global impact. After a year of dating, they decided to move in together. They found a modern apartment overlooking the Thames near Tower Bridge, a compromise between his preference for the financial district and her desire to be near the city's creative hubs. The space reflected their merged lives, clean architectural lines and organized spaces James preferred, filled with bold artwork and unique objects Eliza collected from exhibitions and travels. Their shared home became a gathering place for an increasingly interconnected group of friends from finance and art. These dinner parties sometimes created unusual connections. Hedge fund managers discussing techniques with political photographers, bank executives debating economic theory with installation artists. Those gatherings were fascinating, said Robert Jenkins, a colleague of James. People who would never normally interact were finding common ground. I think that's what James and Eliza both enjoyed, creating unexpected connections. Neither of them could have predicted how these blended worlds they created would eventually contribute to the circumstances that led them to that remote countryside meadow. The professional boundaries they crossed so easily in their relationship would become central to understanding what happened during their final weekend together. As they approached their third anniversary, friends described them as settled, successful, and seemingly destined for a long future together. Yet behind their professional accomplishments and comfortable domestic life, complications were developing that would eventually converge with devastating consequences. In the month leading up to their countryside trip, subtle changes appeared in James's behavior, small shifts that Eliza noticed but couldn't quite place. His typical routine, once predictable down to the minute, became punctuated with unexplained absences and hushed phone conversations. "I need to step out for an hour," he'd say midway through their Sunday afternoons, offering vague explanations about work matters. Or his phone would ring, and he'd move to the balcony, speaking too quietly for her to hear. When she entered rooms, he'd sometimes quickly close laptop windows or switch screens. James had always maintained a certain level of privacy around his work. Client confidentiality was paramount in his position at Wentworth and Lloyd, but this felt different to Eliza. This wasn't his usual discretion. It carried an underlying tension she hadn't seen before. He seemed distracted, Eliza later told her friend Hannah over coffee. "Last Tuesday, I found him staring at his computer at 3 a.m. When I asked if everything was okay, he jumped like I'd caught him doing something wrong. He said it was just work stress, but something didn't feel right." What Eliza didn't know was that James was carefully orchestrating what he hoped would be the perfect proposal. The secrecy that caused the concern masked a flurry of arrangements. Calls to the countryside estate to secure their private dining room overlooking the gardens, consultations with the property's event coordinator about specific details, and conversations with a local musician who would play during the moment itself. His digital secrecy centered around the numerous messages exchanged with his mother about the family ring. The Harrington ring had passed through 4 generations, given only to those partnerships considered truly significant. His grandmother had worn it for 62 years until her passing, and his mother had kept it in a safe deposit box since then. "I never thought I'd be giving this to anyone," James confessed to his younger brother David during a private lunch. "But with Eliza, I can't imagine my life any other way. I keep thinking about how Gran would have loved her, someone who challenges conventions just like she did." The ring itself was unusual, a central diamond surrounded by sapphires in an Art Deco setting from the 1920s. James's great-grandfather had commissioned it specifically for his bride, rejecting traditional designs in favor of something that matched her artistic sensibilities. The parallels to Eliza weren't lost on James. The ring seemed destined for her finger. Retrieving the ring required coordination with his mother, who insisted on having lunch afterward to discuss its history. "She needs to know the stories behind it," his mother said. "About your great-grandmother's work with the suffragettes, how your grandmother wore through the Blitz in London. This ring isn't just jewelry. It's our family's resilience." This meeting added another layer of secrecy, another unexplained absence that Eliza noted with growing unease. Meanwhile, James was also dealing with genuine work concerns. 3 weeks before their planned getaway, he discovered irregularities in accounts managed by a senior partner at the bank. The transactions weren't clearly illegal, but they showed patterns that reminded him of previous financial scandals. Money moving through seemingly unrelated accounts, transfers timed precisely to avoid regulatory attention. "I have to bring this up at the next board meeting," he told his colleague Thomas during a rare moment of candor. "The timing couldn't be worse with everything else happening. But I can't just ignore what I'm seeing here." This professional pressure added authentic stress to James's demeanor, blending with his proposal preparations in ways that made his behavior increasingly difficult for Eliza to interpret. For her part, Eliza had concerns of her own. The exhibition she was curating, featuring artists from regions experiencing political oppression, had drawn criticism from unexpected quarters. Anonymous emails had arrived questioning her choice of artists, suggesting she was promoting dangerous ideologies and should consider the consequences of elevating these voices. "It's just typical outrage," she told herself, though she'd increased security settings on her professional accounts. She hadn't mentioned these messages to James, not wanting to add to the stress she could clearly see he was under. Instead, when she noticed him ending calls abruptly when she entered their apartment or closing browser windows as she approached, she attributed it to his work pressure. The financial sector was always intense, and James had mentioned the upcoming quarterly review. His behavior might be unusual, but she believed she understood its source. "He'll talk when he's ready," she told herself. Everyone handles stress differently. A week before their countryside trip, James met his mother at the bank to retrieve the ring. The small box felt impossibly heavy in his pocket as they walked to lunch afterward. "Your great-grandmother would approve of Eliza," his mother said over their meal. She never trusted people who simply accepted things as they were. She would see that same fire in your Eliza, the desire to question, to challenge. James carefully transported the ring home, hiding the box in his briefcase and then transferring it to an old university textbook on their bookshelf, something he knew Eliza would never think to open. Each morning before she woke, he would check that it remained safely hidden. As their departure date approached, James's anxiety manifested in small ways, checking and rechecking reservations, asking unusually specific questions about what Eliza planned to pack, suggesting she bring something nice for dinner Saturday night. "Is there something special about this weekend I should know about?" she asked teasingly the night before they left. "Just thought we deserved some time away," he replied, unable to meet her eyes directly. "It's been a while since we've had a proper break." Neither of them could have anticipated that this carefully planned romantic gesture would never reach its intended conclusion, that the vintage ring would remain hidden unworn, as their weekend took a turn neither could have predicted. Friday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine for October in England. James woke early, checking his phone for weather forecasts along their route. The small box was already hidden in his travel bag, wrapped in a pair of socks and tucked beneath his clothes. Everything was arranged, the private dining room booked for Saturday night, the local string quartet scheduled to arrive at precisely 8:45 p.m., champagne selected and waiting. "You're packed already?" Eliza asked, finding him in the kitchen preparing coffee. "That's a first. Thought I'd get ahead of things," he said. Traffic might be heavy leaving the city. They loaded James's black Audi just after 10, the trunk filled with weekend bags and a hamper of snacks Eliza had prepared. James was particularly careful with his bag, insisting on placing it himself in a specific position. Eliza noticed but said nothing, assuming he'd packed something fragile, perhaps a bottle of wine for their stay. as they pulled away from their London apartment. The city's constant motion gave way gradually to suburban streets, then country roads. James's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his usual calm driving manner replaced by an intense focus that seemed unnecessary for quiet roads. "Everything all right?" Eliza asked, reaching over to touch his arm. "Just thinking about work," he replied, forcing a smile. "Sorry, this weekend is about us, no distractions." 3 hours into their journey, they stopped at a small village pub. Over lunch, James seemed to relax finally, the distance from London easing the tension in his shoulders. They sat in a corner booth, talking about nothing important. A book Eliza was reading, a film they wanted to see, plans for Christmas still months away. Normal conversation that belied what would happen in the coming days. "Tell me about this place we're staying," Eliza said as they returned to the car. "You've been surprisingly secretive about it." "Hartwell Manor," James replied. "It's a 16th century estate converted into exclusive accommodations. Only 6 guest suites in the entire place. Thomas recommended it, said it's perfect for special occasions." What James didn't mention was how difficult it had been to secure a reservation, the considerable deposit required, or the detailed conversations he'd had with the Manor's events coordinator about the proposal arrangement. Some secrets he believed were worth keeping. The final hour of their journey took them deeper into the countryside. The roads narrowed, hedgerows rose on either side, and occasional glimpses of rolling hills appeared between trees, beginning to show autumn colors. They passed fewer cars, and the landscape became increasingly remote. "I didn't realize we'd be quite so far from everything," Eliza commented, watching the last small village disappear behind them. "That's part of the appeal," James said. "Complete privacy." They turned onto a private road marked only by a discreet stone pillar. The drive curved through ancient oak trees before revealing Hartwell Manor, a grand stone structure with multiple chimneys and leaded glass windows. Ivy climbed portions of the facade, and formal gardens spread from the main building. A staff member in a dark suit appeared as they pulled up, greeting them by name and directing another employee to handle their luggage. The gravel crunched beneath their feet as they approached the heavy wooden front door, which opened to a grand entrance hall with a sweeping staircase and original oak paneling. "Welcome to Hartwell Manor," said the manager, introducing himself as William. "We've been expecting you, Mr. Harrington, Ms. Winters. Let me show you to your suite." Their accommodation occupied a corner of the manor's second floor, a sitting room with fireplace already lit, a bedroom with a 4-poster bed, and a modern bathroom cleverly integrated into the historic space. Windows looked out over the formal gardens, and beyond them, the rolling countryside that seemed to stretch endlessly. "Dinner is served between 7 and 9 in the main dining room, though private dining can be arranged with notice," William explained. "The grounds are at your disposal. Maps are on the desk. Breakfast is served from 7 until 10. After he left, Eliza walked to windows, taking in the view. "This is incredible, James. Must have cost a fortune." "Worth every penny," he replied, watching her rather than the view. The ring box pressed against his leg from inside his pocket, where he'd transferred it during the unpacking. They spent the remainder of Friday exploring the grounds, walking through manicured gardens, past a small lake, and along woodland paths. The estate encompassed over 200 acres, most of it untouched countryside. They encountered few other guests, adding to the sense of exclusivity and isolation. Dinner that evening was served in the manor's main dining room, a grand space with a vaulted ceiling and tapestries on the walls. Only 2 other couples were present, seated at well-spaced tables that ensured privacy. The menu featured seasonal local ingredients, prepared with obvious skill. "The Cliftons," James whispered, nodding toward an older couple across the room. "He's on the board at Wentworth. Didn't expect to see them here. Do you need to say hello?" Eliza asked. "Better not to mix business and pleasure," James replied. "I'll pretend I didn't see them." Later, returning to their suite, they passed a man in the corridor who nodded curtly to James. His face registered momentary surprise before he continued walking. "Another colleague?" Eliza asked once they were inside their room. "Daniel Phillips," James said, his expression troubled. "Works with our investment team. Strange coincidence. That night, Eliza woke to find James standing at the window, staring out into the darkness. The clock showed 3:17 a.m. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Just admiring the view," he said, though nothing was visible in the darkness. "Go back to sleep?" Saturday morning brought another perfect autumn day. They had breakfast on the terrace, enjoying the unseasonably warm weather. James checked his watch repeatedly, awareness of the evening's plan clearly on his mind. What he didn't know was that the day would unfold in ways he couldn't anticipate, that forces were already in motion that would prevent his carefully planned proposal. This investigation took unexpected turns when detectives later pieced together the events of that Saturday. What appeared to be coincidental meetings at the estate would prove to be anything but the presence of James's colleagues, the unusual staff in that weekend, and the couple's movements throughout the day would all become critical elements in understanding what led them from the luxurious Hartwell Manor to that remote meadow miles away. George Bennett began each day the same way for 40 years. Walking the eastern boundary of his farmland at dawn to check fences and monitor his sheep. Thursday's inspection should have been routine. The autumn morning was crisp, dew heavy on the grass, his border collie running ahead as usual. It was a dog that alerted him first, barking persistently from a meadow near the old oak tree. Thought it was a fox or maybe a deer, Bennett later told reporters. Rex doesn't usually make that much noise unless it's something worth noting. What the farmer found instead would transform his quiet corner of the countryside into the center of a complex investigation. James Harrington and Eliza Winters lay in the tall grass, positioned side by side. Their clothing, he in what appeared to be dress trousers and a button-down shirt, she in an evening dress, suggested they hadn't planned to be in a remote field. Bennett used his mobile phone to call emergency services immediately. "I knew right away they weren't sleeping," he explained. Something terrible had happened to these people. They looked out of place, like they belonged in London, not a field in the middle of nowhere. Police response was swift, but complicated by the location. The nearest paved road ended nearly a quarter mile from the scene, requiring officers to approach on foot across uneven farmland. Detective Inspector Catherine Powell arrived 90 minutes after Bennett's call, by which time uniformed officers had established perimeter around the scene. "My first impression was that these individuals weren't meant to be found quickly," Powell noted in her initial report. The location was isolated, visible only from certain angles across the farmland. Had Bennett not been checking his fence line, they might have remained undiscovered for days. Forensic teams documented the scene meticulously. No obvious signs of trauma were immediately visible, though the medical examiner would later determine the cause of death during autopsy. What struck investigators was a careful positioning. Bodies arranged deliberately rather than fallen where they died. They were placed with purpose, one forensic technician observed. Hands at their sides, facing upward. Someone took time arranging them. A search of the surrounding area revealed James's black Audi parked on a narrow dirt track approximately 400 meters from the bodies. The vehicle was unlocked, keys still in the ignition. Inside, investigators found overnight bags in the trunk suggesting a weekend trip and a hamper containing untouched food in the back seat. The most significant discovery came when Detective Powell instructed officers to conduct a thorough search of the vehicle's interior. In the glove compartment, nestled beneath the car's manual and insurance documents, officers found a small velvet box. Inside was an antique diamond and sapphire ring, the Harrington family heirloom that James had planned to present to Eliza during their weekend away. "The ring discovery changed our understanding immediately," Powell explained. "This wasn't a random incident. These were people with plans for a future that someone deliberately interrupted." Initial examination of phone records showed both victims' devices had last connected to a cell tower near Hartwell Manor approximately 18 hours before their bodies were discovered. James's last outgoing call was to the Manor's front desk at 4:17 p.m. on Saturday. Eliza's phone showed a text message sent to a friend in London at 5:22 p.m. "Dinner tonight at 8. James is acting strange. We'll call tomorrow with updates." By Thursday afternoon, police had identified the couple through their vehicle registration and driver's licenses. Notifications to next of kin were made by 6 p.m., and an investigation headquarters established at the local police station. Officers were dispatched to Hartwell Manor to interview staff and guests. "We're treating this as suspicious deaths," Detective Inspector Powell told her team during the first briefing. "Two professionals from London don't end up in a remote field by accident. The lack of obvious trauma doesn't mean there wasn't foul play. Someone brought them to that location, and someone arranged them that way." The following morning, preliminary forensic results provided the first substantial clues. Soil samples from the victims' shoes didn't match the meadow where they were found, suggesting they had died elsewhere. Trace evidence included unusual pollen from plants not native to the immediate area, and microscopic fibers that would eventually be matched to carpeting at Hartwell Manor. Most telling was the medical examiner's initial assessment. Time of death approximately 36 to 48 hours prior to discovery. No obvious external trauma. Toxicology pending. The unopened ring box represented more than just a proposal that never happened. For investigators, it established a timeline and motive that would guide their initial inquiries. Someone had interrupted not just two lives, but the future those lives were building together. As Detective Inspector Powell's team dug into the backgrounds of James Harrington and Eliza Winters, a more complicated picture emerged than initially apparent. What began as an investigation into two deaths in the countryside revealed professional entanglements that extended into London's financial district and art world. 6 weeks before their final weekend, James had stayed late at Wentworth and Lloyd's offices, reviewing quarterly reports for a portfolio of high-value clients. His position gave him access to transaction histories across multiple accounts, data most employees couldn't see simultaneously. It was this broad view that allowed him to notice the pattern. "He called me around midnight," Thomas Blackwood later told investigators. "Asked if I could come back to the office. When I arrived, he had spreadsheets open across 3 monitors. He wouldn't say exactly what he'd found, just that something didn't add up." What James had discovered was a sophisticated series of transactions moving through accounts managed by Gilbert Harlow, one of the bank's senior partners. The individual movements weren't unusual, but when mapped together, they formed a pattern consistent with money laundering, legitimate-seeming transactions disguising the true source of funds. "It wasn't obvious," explained financial forensic expert Diane Murray, who later examined James's notes. He identified micropatterns across dozens of accounts over 3 years. Most fraud detection software wouldn't catch it because the transactions were deliberately kept small enough to avoid triggering alerts. James documented his findings meticulously, creating a detailed report that traced approximately £14 million through various accounts. The clients connected to these accounts included 2 politically exposed persons from Eastern Europe and a private investment company with reported ties to organized crime. 3 weeks before his death, James had a closed-door meeting with Edward Chambers, the bank's compliance officer. According to Chambers, James presented his findings calmly, but expressed concern about bringing them to wider attention. He understood the implications, Chambers stated. "Harlow wasn't just any partner. He managed relationships with some of our most valuable clients." James worried about retaliation, but felt professionally obligated to report what he'd found. Chambers advised James to continue gathering evidence before approaching the bank's board or regulatory authorities. Their meeting concluded with James being sworn to secrecy, while a compliance team conducted their own review. "I told him to be careful who he discussed this with," Chambers admitted. "These clients have considerable resources and connections. I never imagined my warning would prove so tragically prescient." While James navigated these dangerous financial waters, Eliza faced challenges of her own. Her upcoming exhibition at the Hayward Gallery, titled Voices Against Power, featured artists from regions under authoritarian control. The works included pointed criticism of governmental corruption, with several pieces directly implicating wealthy business figures who operated between East and West. "It wasn't just art about abstract concepts," explained Natalie Wong, Eliza's colleague. "These artists named names, documented specific instances of corruption, and connected political suppression to financial interests in London and other Western capitals." For weeks before her death, Eliza received the first threatening email. "Consider carefully whether these voices deserve a platform. Some stories are better left untold. This is friendly advice." She dismissed it initially, accustomed to occasional pushback against controversial exhibitions. 3 days later, a second message arrived with more specific language. The piece by Andrei Kozlov directly slanders people who don't appreciate public scrutiny. They can reach much further than you imagine. Andrei Kozlov's installation featured documented evidence of corruption involving an Eastern European energy magnate with property in London and banking relationships with several prestigious financial institutions, including Wentworth and Lloyd. Eliza reported these messages to the gallery security team, but continued preparation for the exhibition. Her curator's statement defended the artist's right to expose corruption. Art speaks truth when official channels fail. These works document verifiable connections between political oppression and financial gain. A week before the countryside trip, Eliza received a final message. We know where you live. We know about your weekend plans. Last chance to reconsider your exhibition choices. She mentioned this message to Hannah during their coffee meeting, but downplayed its seriousness. Just trying to intimidate me, she said. Probably some assistant to one of these oligarchs thinking they can frighten me into censoring the exhibition. What neither James nor Eliza realized was how their professional lives intersected. 3 of the clients whose accounts James had flagged for suspicious activity were directly connected to individuals named in artworks selected for Eliza's exhibition. The same people threatened by public exposure through art were potentially being investigated for financial crimes through James's work. The overlap is remarkable, Detective Inspector Powell noted. Independently, each was pulling at threads that led back to the same powerful interests. Together, unknowingly, they represented a significant threat to certain individuals. Police examination of both victims' computers revealed another crucial detail. Neither had shared their professional concerns with the other. James's notes about the suspicious transactions were password protected on his work laptop. Eliza's threatening emails were saved in a private folder. Despite living together and planning a future as partners, they had kept these dangerous elements of their professional lives separate. They were trying to protect each other, theorized Dr. Helen Foster, the psychologist consulting on the case. Each believed they were handling their own problem without burdening the other. This compartmentalization may have prevented them from recognizing the danger they faced collectively. The weekend at Hartwell Manor took on new significance in light of these discoveries. The estate's guest list of that weekend included Daniel Phillips, who worked directly under Gilbert Harlow at Wentworth and Lloyd, and photography collector Victor Renkoff, whose brother was explicitly named in one of Kozlov's artworks in Eliza's exhibition. Most telling was reservation information showing that both parties had booked their stays after James reserved his room, suggesting their presence wasn't coincidental but responsive to learning about the couple's planned getaway. The evidence suggests something nobody expected, that James and Eliza may have been targeted not for separate professional threats they posed, but because together they had unknowingly assembled 2 halves of a dangerous puzzle. Their relationship had connected banking evidence with artistic documentation, creating a comprehensive picture of corruption that certain powerful individuals couldn't allow to emerge. If you're following this case closely, now would be the perfect time to subscribe to our channel. We're about to examine how the professional dangers manifested during that final weekend at Hartwell Manor, including exclusive interview footage with staff members who observed critical interactions between our victims and the other guests who may have orchestrated their deaths. Hartwell Manor maintained an air of exclusivity through its limited accommodations, just 6 suites, each designed to provide guests with privacy and discretion. Detective Inspector Powell's team identified all visitors present during the weekend of James and Eliza's stay, but 2 individuals received particular scrutiny. Daniel Phillips from Wentworth and Lloyd, and Victor Renkoff, a photography collector with connections to artists featured in Eliza's exhibition. Daniel Phillips occupied the Willow Suite, located in the east wing across the main staircase from James and Eliza's Oak Suite. As a senior investment manager reporting directly to Gilbert Harlow, Phillips worked on the very accounts James had flagged for suspicious activity. I had no idea Harrington would be there. Phillips insisted during his first police interview. Pure coincidence. Hartwell's been my regular weekend retreat for years. Reservation records told a different story. Phillips had booked a stay just 14 hours after James confirmed his reservation, hardly the pattern of a regular guest. Furthermore, phone records showed Phillips had made 3 calls to Gilbert Harlow within minutes of making his booking. We never spoke that weekend, Phillips maintained. I saw him in passing in the hallway once, nodded hello. That was it. We work for the same bank, but in different departments. No reason to socialize. Yet staff accounts contradicted this claim of non-interaction. William Hayes, the Manor's manager, recalled seeing Phillips and James in intense conversation Saturday morning in the garden. They stood by the stone fountain. Hayes stated, I was showing another guest the grounds when I noticed them. Mr. Harrington seemed agitated, gesturing with his hands. Mr. Phillips kept looking around as if concerned about being overheard. When confronted with this witness statement, Phillips amended his previous account. Oh, that. Yes, we did speak briefly about a work matter. He approached me, actually. Nothing significant, just asking about a client account. I've forgotten about it. Phillips claimed to have spent Saturday evening dining alone in his room, then reading until approximately 11 p.m. before going to sleep. However, his room key card records showed his door opening at 11:42 p.m. and not being used again until 3:17 a.m., contradicting his statement about staying in. The second person of interest, Victor Renkoff, presented as a photography collector staying at Hartwell Manor to discuss acquiring pieces from a local artist. His connection to Eliza wasn't immediately apparent until investigators discovered his brother, Mikhail Renkoff, was explicitly named an artwork scheduled for Eliza's exhibition, artwork documenting his alleged involvement in privatization schemes that transferred public assets to private control through questionable financial transactions. Renkoff claimed no prior knowledge of or interaction with Eliza during the weekend. I don't follow contemporary art politics, he told investigators. I collect landscape photography. I had no idea who this woman was until police mentioned her name. Digital forensics proved otherwise. Renkoff had visited the Hayward Gallery's website multiple times in the weeks before the weekend, specifically viewing pages describing Eliza's upcoming exhibition. His email records included messages forwarded from his brother containing news articles about the controversial show. More damning was security footage from the Manor's dining room, showing Renkoff watching Eliza intently throughout dinner on Friday evening, though they were seated at different tables. At one point, he appears to take photos of her with his phone, behavior inconsistent with someone who had no idea who she was. Housekeeping staff reported another troubling detail. When cleaning Renkoff's room on Saturday afternoon, they found newspaper clippings about the upcoming exhibition and printed photos of several artists, including Andrei Kozlov, whose work most directly implicated Renkoff's brother. The room was unusually messy, noted housekeeper Vera Mitchell. Papers spread everywhere, like he'd been studying them. Not typical behavior for our guests. Both Phillips and Renkoff provided similar accounts of Saturday evening, each claiming to have dined separately, retired early, and noticed nothing unusual. Yet bar receipts showed both men ordered drinks within minutes of each other around 9:30 p.m., after James and Eliza had left the dining room. Security footage, while not covering all areas of the property, showed them walking toward the garden together at 10:12 p.m. Most concerning was their departure timeline. Though both had booked stays through Sunday, each checked out early Sunday morning. Phillips at 7:15 a.m. and Renkoff at 7:40 a.m. Both cited unexpected business matters, requiring their return to London. Their behavior follows a pattern we see in premeditated actions, explained Powell. Their presence wasn't coincidental. Their interactions weren't chance encounters. And their hasty departure suggests knowledge of events that hadn't yet been discovered. Phone records later revealed a final, critical detail, a 16-minute call between Phillips and Harlow at 6:23 a.m. Sunday morning, followed immediately by a call from Phillips to Renkoff. Within an hour of these calls, both men were on their way back to London, while James and Eliza had already been moved to the remote field where they would be found days later. 1 week after the discovery of James and Eliza's bodies, Detective Inspector Powell's incident room walls displayed an intricate timeline. Photographs, witness statements, and forensic reports created a complex web of evidence. The investigation had moved beyond initial findings into detailed analysis that revealed crucial inconsistencies. Dr. Amar Patel, the forensic pathologist who conducted the autopsies, delivered findings that shifted the investigation's direction. Toxicology shows both victims ingested a rare compound, thallium combined with a sedative agent. This particular mixture is uncommon in typical poisoning cases, but has been documented in several Eastern European assassinations over the past decade. The poison had been administered in their dinner Saturday evening. Based on the concentrations in their systems, Dr. Patel estimated they consumed it between 8 o'clock and 9 p.m. during their meal at Hartwell Manor. Security footage confirmed they dined alone at a corner table, with James ordering the beef Wellington and Eliza choosing the sea base. The poison wasn't the main course, Powell explained to her team. Kitchen samples tested negative. It was introduced later, likely in their wine or dessert. Digital forensic specialists recovered deleted footage from the Manor security system, showing a critical gap. Between 9:15 p.m. and 9:40 p.m., cameras covering the main dining room experienced a technical malfunction, precisely when James and Eliza would have been served their dessert and coffee. This wasn't a coincidence, noted technical specialist Omar Bakri. The system was accessed using staff credentials belonging to night manager Andrew Collins. However, Collins was verifiable at the front desk during this time, meaning someone else used his login. Fingerprint analysis from the couple's suite yielded another breakthrough. Partial prints matching Daniel Phillips were found on the inside handle of their bathroom door, contradicting his claim of never entering their room. When confronted, Phillips changed his story again. James invited me in briefly to discuss a work matter, he claimed. I used the bathroom while there. It was a harmless interaction I forgot to mention. Hotel records told a different story. James and Eliza's key card showed they left their suite at 7:30 p.m. for dinner and did not return until 9:50 p.m. Phillips had accessed their room while they were absent. Witness accounts from staff added to the timeline. Bartender Fiona Murray recalled serving James and Eliza after dinner. They seemed off, especially him. Mr. Harrington kept losing his train of thought mid-sentence. Ms. Winters was steadier, but complained about feeling unusually tired. They left their drinks half-finished around 10:30. Security cameras showed the couple walking unsteadily toward the garden rather than returning to their room. This was their last appearance on any surveillance footage. Their movements after 10:40 p.m. remained unrecorded until George Bennett discovered their bodies days later. While Phillips and Renkoff remained persons of interest, conflicting accounts from other guests complicated the investigation. The Cliftons, the older couple James had mentioned seeing at dinner, provided contradictory statements about that evening. We saw the young couple leave with that art collector. Renkoff, Margaret Clifton initially told police. They walked out together, talking quite animatedly. Yet her husband insisted they left alone. The young man was unsteady on his feet. His girlfriend was helping him walk. No one was with them. When investigators showed Mrs. Clifton footage confirming her husband's version, she became flustered. I must have confused the evenings. My memory isn't what it used to be. Phone records later revealed 3 calls between Robert Clifton and Gilbert Harlow on Sunday morning, suggesting the Cliftons' presence and inconsistent testimony might not be coincidental either. The most revealing evidence came from an unexpected source. Manor housekeeper Vera Mitchell, while cleaning the library Sunday morning, had discovered a handwritten note fallen behind a sofa. She'd pocketed it, intending to return it to Lost and Found, but forgot until seeing news reports about the deaths. The note, in James's handwriting, read, E. Meet me in library at 10. Discovered P+ our connection to accounts. Need to show you something urgent. J. This changes our understanding of events, Powell explained. James wasn't just randomly poisoned. He'd made a connection between Phillips and Renkoff, likely discovering they were working together. Forensic examination of James's laptop, recovered from their suite, revealed fragments of deleted files, including a document titled Par_Connections, Excelsex last modified Saturday afternoon. Though partially corrupted, readable portions showed James had identified shared beneficial ownership between accounts managed by Phillips and companies connected to Renkoff's family. He figured out while at the Manor, Powell told her team. The very people he suspected of financial crimes were staying under the same roof, and he recognized the connection. Most significant was a discovery made by trace evidence analysts examining soil and pollen from the victim's clothing. Microscopic evidence indicated they had been in the manor's greenhouse, a structure not on the main property maps provided police, but located behind the kitchen gardens. When investigators examined this previously overlooked building, they found clear signs of disturbance and traces of the same poison found in the victims. This is where they were initially taken. Powell concluded. The greenhouse served as a temporary location before they were moved to the field. The final piece that transformed the investigation came when analysts uncovered the true identity of Viktor Renkov. Fingerprint matching through international databases revealed he was actually Alexei Kuznetsov, a former intelligence officer with documented connections to both financial crimes and state-sponsored operations. 3 months after George Bennett discovered James and Eliza in that remote meadow, the investigation culminated in coordinated arrests across London, Geneva, and Prague. Daniel Phillips was taken into custody at Wentworth and Lloyd's offices, charged with conspiracy to murder and financial crimes. Gilbert Harlow was arrested at his Kensington home. Viktor Renkov, confirmed as Alexei Kuznetsov, was apprehended while attempting to board a private flight to Montenegro. The case prosecutor described it as a calculated elimination of 2 individuals who independently discovered complementary halves of an extensive criminal operation. James had identified the financial mechanics, while Eliza had unknowingly curated artistic evidence of the same criminal enterprise, connecting money laundering to its political origins. They never shared their professional concerns with each other, Detective Inspector Powell explained at the press conference. Had they done so, they might have recognized the danger sooner. Instead, they unknowingly became a significant threat when they happened to stay at Hartwell Manor alongside the very people they were exposing. Forensic evidence confirmed the greenhouse as a location where James and Eliza succumbed to the poison. Security footage eventually recovered from a gardener's weather camera captured Phillips and Kuznetsov moving 2 figures to a groundskeeping vehicle shortly after midnight. This vehicle was later tracked to the remote field through soil samples and tire impressions. The manor's night manager, Andrew Collins, confessed to accepting payment for providing his security credentials and access to the kitchen during dessert service. His testimony secured convictions for both primary suspects. International investigation revealed the operation extended beyond these individuals to a network spanning multiple countries. Authorities froze assets exceeding £170 million linked to accounts James had flagged. The artworks from Eliza's exhibition now serve as evidence in ongoing prosecutions. Yet several questions remain unanswered. Why was the ring box moved to the glove compartment rather than simply disposed of? Investigators theorize this may have been an attempt to suggest robbery wasn't the motive, directing suspicion elsewhere. The precise role of the Cliftons continues to puzzle authorities. Though they provided testimony against Phillips and Kuznetsov, their prior connection to Harlow remains unexplained. Were they willing participants or unwitting observers? Perhaps most troubling is the sophistication behind the operation. Evidence suggests a level of planning and international coordination that points to larger forces behind these individual actors, connections that continue to be investigated. James's mother kept the family ring after the investigation concluded. It represents a future that should have been, she told reporters. A reminder that seeking truth comes at profound risk. For more cases that challenge conventional thinking and examine the unexpected connections between seemingly separate worlds, subscribe to True Crime Stories. Our next episode explores how a routine traffic stop uncovered a decade-long mystery involving identical evidence found at crime scenes across 3 continents. Join our community of critical thinkers who look beyond obvious answers to find the complex truth beneath.